Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How the devil are you doing, Ken?
I'm exceptionally well, thanks for asking, Rory. I'm so glad to be here. This is a brand new season of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We're just coming out of an academic break. I'm so excited because we've got a new format. For those of you that watch the podcast on YouTube, and if you're not watching it on YouTube, go to YouTube and put in Counselling Tutor Podcast. You'll find us there. You'll see there's a slightly different look specifically on my side. I've changed studio. Being posh, Rory, I've just moved house.
Studio.
But we've got an exciting new sponsor on the podcast as well. That is webhealer.net. We'll be telling you more about that in a moment. And the new format. So we're starting off with a brand new section, Theory in Practice. And this is where we're going to be taking common theories held in counseling and psychotherapy, but looking not so deep at the theory, but how does that theory really apply in the real world practice? Theory in itself, reading it from a textbook can sometimes be dry, but when you put it into practice, it's when the real magic happens, Rory. I'm looking forward to that section.
Yes.
Practice Partner is a brand new section to the podcast. That's our second section today. Within Practice Partner, we're going to be looking at private practice, what you need to consider if you're setting up to earn a living or to earn some of your living as a counsellor or psychotherapist. And today we're going to be looking at the all-important business mindset. Very different to a counsellor or a psychotherapist mindset, a business mindset. Interesting conversation. And then we go into Practice Matters. We're keeping Practice Matters because boy, does it work. And that's where we call on professionals out there that are in practice to come and share some CPD with us or an element of their practice. And today we have Christine Shaw, who's going to be speaking about humour in therapy. But here we are, to episode 234, a brand new sponsor for our podcast, Rory. WebHealer.
Yes. I mean, it's just so exciting to connect with WebHealer, and as we'll see, having a web presence is absolutely imperative if you're running a private practice, Ken.
Yeah, I think with our new Practice Partner section, that is going to just fit in so beautifully. And, it's a really good fit for us bringing on WebHealer as a sponsor. And the reason for that is because, we run a Facebook group. It's the Counselling Tutor Facebook group. Go on Facebook, put in Counselling Tutor, you'll find us. And we have tens of thousands of members. And just recently, there have been so many posts within that Facebook group of individuals saying, thinking of going into private practice. How should I build a website? Should I do it myself? Do you know of anybody who can do that for you? And I think WebHealer is a perfect fit. So this episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by webhealer.net. WebHealer are the go-to provider of websites for private practitioners in the United Kingdom. Established for over 20 years, Rory. Hey?
Wow.
20 years.
Wow.
WebHealer offers a non-technical, which I think is really important, and fully supported service to help therapists grow their private practice. I think what's really important is WebHealer are focused on counselors and psychotherapists. It is what they do. They're not just website builders. They create web presence for us as counselors and psychotherapists. And just one customer from a website, Rory, just one customer in a year will pay for the service of having a website built from webhealer.net, which I think is a great return on that investment. And of course, because WebHealer is now a sponsor of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, there is a deal for you as well. So if you do go and check that out, you go to webhealer.net, and use the coupon code CT100. That stands for Counselling Tutor 100, CT100, and you'll get £100 off, Rory. It'll be off their Do It For Me service. So go check that out, webhealer.net. We are delighted to have you on board with us for the podcast. Well, Rory, let's get into that very first section that we've been talking about. That's theory and practice, and we're talking about how to use the core conditions.
Yes, and I think we'll start off by just looking at the words empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. And of course, they're words out of a textbook, Ken. They're words out of a textbook. Reading them and understanding what they mean, to write an essay is, I think, a little different to actually practicing them. And I think if we start off with congruence, being real, and I think that I, like a lot of people, came from a different profession when I studied counselling. And if I'm honest, being real and genuine and being me wasn't something that was part of that profession. I was part of a company that had a message. And it took a little while for me just to be myself, because clients meet you in the therapy room, or if you're doing your skills practice. If you're real and genuine and a real person in front of them, they're more likely to share what's on their troubled minds. And empathy, I think, is about really working hard to put your stuff to one side. It's not about you, it's about them. Listening to their frame of reference. And I think, I was out recently having lunch, and I was listening to two people having a conversation, and one person wasn't displaying empathy. Every time the person said, I'm having this difficulty, I could hear the other person said, oh, you think that's difficult? You should hear my difficulty.
Yeah.
And eventually that person just didn't explore it anymore. They went on to talk about something on the TV. And I think that's the key thing. We have to put our own experience, valid as it is, to one side. And we're focused on that person in front of us. They are everything, whether you're doing it in practice or you're doing it in skills. And, if you're starting as a student, maybe you're going back to do your skills session, or you're just starting them, it can take a bit of practice, just to sit and listen and try and reflect back what somebody said, to try and understand their frame of reference. And then finally, and I think this is probably the toughest, unconditional positive regard. Ken, we have our own value systems, things that we believe we should do in our lives and our family does. And we're going to meet people who have different values and different ideas.
Yeah.
And again, we have to give them unconditional positive regard. They may have a very different view of life. I mean, a good example might be in the UK. A few years ago, we had, if I dare mention this, Brexit, and that was very polarizing. So if you think you may sit on one or either side of the fence of Brexit, we should have stayed, we should have gone, But, if you meet someone with a different view to you, how do you give them empathy? And you do unconditional positive regard, and you do that by pausing your own value system and hearing their value system. And I have to say, congruence, empathy, and unconditional positive regard, they're personal development points, and you have to work on them. Nobody, and I include myself, wandered into a therapy room or a skills practice room, and they were all there. It just didn't happen. And more to the point, Ken, it's ongoing. This is ongoing piece of work. When I meet people now in therapy, I'm working on it. It's a complete work in progress. And I've been working on it for the last 20 years, Ken.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? There's no end to that personal development.
No.
I love that you've chosen this as a topic for that brand new theory in practice section, Rory. And I like that you started with congruence. We understand what congruence is. Look it up in a textbook. There it is. It's outlined for you. It's kind of being your true genuine is another word used for congruence, isn't it? Genuine self. It's kind of when what you're feeling inside is shown outside. And I can't help but think back to my first steps when I went into placement. I had an idea of who Counselling Ken was. So I think I was still finding out who Ken was at that stage. I mean, it was early placement. And I almost felt that I needed to be a professional counselor, that I needed to show up, sit a little bit straighter, speak in a calmer and more informed way. And of course, realizing that congruence is about being who you are, and the reason I'm bringing this is because I've heard it from so many students. Sometimes we're tempted to maybe look at somebody else and maybe look at Carl Rogers or one of these skills practice sessions that are available online and go, oh, I don't do it like that. I don't show up like that. Maybe I need to try and be like that. And all we need to do is be our true selves. What we're doing with that congruence is showing the client that I'm going to be me. I'm going to be as individual as I am a human, and it's okay for you to be you. There's the message that comes across in that. Of course, empathy. I love empathy. Empathy, I think, is, again, it's interesting because we're kind of walking in their shoes, seeing it from a client's frame of reference. So when I first thought about empathy, I thought it was about looking out from the client's eyes, as it were. But you're right, Rory. It's about your personal development. The more you develop yourself, the more empathic you can be in service of others. And that's interesting. That is almost a paradoxical, that we need to work on ourselves to be there, to be able to serve others. You think, no, I've got to work more on serving others. But, the more we clear our own Johari's window, great personal development tool, look it up online. We've got podcasts about it. Go to counsellingtutor.com, type it in the search. Clearing that window out, the more we know about ourselves, who we are, how we show up. If we're talking about that first word, congruence, we get to find our authentic self, and then be there in service of someone else, because it's our stuff that gets in the way. If somebody is sharing something, we go, oh, that's almost like this, like that person, or like that happened to me, then we're not being there. We're not fully empathic. So recognizing our own stuff to be able to put that one side doesn't mean we're perfect. Doesn't mean we've worked through everything and that we're now, I guess, glowing and floating as we walk around. We're all people. And that's congruence right there. And then, of course, we've got the unconditional positive regard, and UPR, as it's known. And I want to share something from Carl Rogers. I pulled it up. It's a caring which is not possessive, which demands no personal gratification. It involves an acceptance of and a caring for the client as a separate person, with permission for him or her to have his or her own feelings and experiences, and to find his or her own meaning for them. Mr. Carl Rogers. I love that.
Wonderful quote.
I love that. I really do. That unconditional positive regard. We've spoken about it before on the podcast. It's not about agreeing with everybody's lifestyle or what they may have done or the positions that they hold, but it is recognizing they have a right to feel and think that way, and looking at them as a fellow human being. So we're not looking for the difference. We're looking for what is the same. When I'm in a room and there's a client sat opposite me, there's another beating heart. Even if that's online, there's another beating heart. And it's about that deep compassion and care that other beating heart has as much right as anybody to be free of their pain. And I think that kind of, for me, is that unconditional positive regard in action. And all of them, read them in a textbook, write about them in your assignments, but to practice them, it is about practice. It's about getting out there, and it's about your own personal growing as a person. And as you grow, so those, I guess we called them core conditions when we started this off, grow within our practice in service of others, Rory.
Yes, and I think I'd like to pick up that, grow within the practice. I think that's important, because I can't tell you how many can I have a word with you conversations I've had with students through the years. At the end of a class, someone hangs back, and one of the questions that comes up a lot is, so do you practice the core conditions in your life, just in the therapy room or in your general life? And my answer to that was, I do the best I can. I do the best I can. And I think of it like the control knobs on an old hi-fi amplifier. You used to have balance and tone and bass that you could turn them up and down. And I have those controls for empathy, congruence, unconditional positive regard in my outside life. So I try my best, but there are some times where you have to stand your ground. And recently I was in a queue to get a coffee, and somebody pushed in front of me, and I said, "Oh, hang on a second," and they kind of muttered and went onto the back. So I think for me, it's about a realization in my outside life that everybody has their own story, Ken. Everybody has their own story. And sometimes we don't see that story, we just see the behavior. So I try to think of it like that. I try to, if someone's a bit rude to me, I think that maybe they're having a bad day. And, I try. And I've got to be honest, most days I fail. To be totally congruent, genuine, unconditional, positive regard within my own life, because it's a very tough ask. And life sometimes doesn't allow you to do that, just to be in your own life. So the answer to the question is, do you practice it in your own life? I think you adapt it, you work at that, and it's about your own personal development. My wife will sometimes say to me, she'll say, "You're so philosophical about things, Rory. Doesn't anything kind of get on your nerves?" And I said, "Well, everybody's got their own story, but sometimes you just have to, you have to step in and say, that's not okay." But yeah, I think it's one of those things that anybody who's studying counselling learns to adapt into their own life. But in the therapy room, of course, we can turn those volume knobs up to the full capacity and just focus on the person in front of us.
I'm glad you went down that road, Rory. I think, I know from messages, emails, and posts on Facebook or messages on Facebook we get, there's often that student starting this road that thinks that you need to practice this 100% all of the time, always be empathic, always view everybody, no matter where in your life, with unconditional positive regard. And as you say, they become a way of being. They do. Carl Rogers speaks about that, and that's fantastic. And as we develop, it's almost like they become more naturally implemented within your life. I can think of times that I might be standing in a supermarket and somebody might be in a bad mood and say something and push in front of me or whatever it may be, and everything remains calm inside, and there's a little smile on my face, and it is a smiling of caring and loving for that person for where they may be. But there's also days when that same thing might happen. where
the day I had.
Yeah, like a day you were just, and that is real life. And I think congruence is about saying that that's how it is. It's not a bar that we have to reach. It is something that we look at to implement within our lives. Of course, when we're in the counseling session, we act from that way of being, because we know, and the research and the theory shows us that it is effective. It is effective. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes part of your life. I wanted to share another Carl Rogers quote. The more I can keep a relationship free of judgment and evaluation, the more this will permit the other person to reach the point where he or she recognizes that the locus of evaluation, the center of responsibility, lies within himself, herself. I'm putting in the gender specifics there, but it's interesting because that's the theory. There is the theory, but in practice we practice that. Why? Because the theory shows us that is effective. And also, when you do adapt that the core conditions as a way of being, I think they soften life, Rory. I feel my life is richer for that learning and that integration of those conditions within my everyday life.
Oh, I quite agree. And, you've quoted beautifully from Rogers, Ken, in this piece. And I would like to just remind everybody, of course, of Carl Rogers' potato in the potato bin at Glen Ellen, where, of course, he lived on the farm. And he went down and looked at the potato bin and saw this potato sprouting, and it was doing its best. Even though it was in kind of reduced circumstances with little light and no water and no soil, it was just doing a little sprout. And he plants a potato in the ground with water and light and nutrient, and it will sprout out. And I think that's where those core conditions are. Rogers referred to it as soil of a different kind, and I think that's where the theory really lives. We're kind of emotional gardeners in our practice, and we tend to our clients and even our peers when we're doing skills in the same way we would tend to someone and help it grow. And if that means sometimes we get dirty hands and we get a few aches and pains along the way, that's what you buy into. Gardening is hard work and therapy. can sometimes be a bit taxing. So I think the message is, we don't have to be perfect, but we just have to try, and we have to reflect. And part of it is sitting and thinking, what, how could I have done that differently? I don't use the word better, differently. What was in me that held me back from being more congruent? Or, what was it in me that stopped me fully accepting the person in front of me? And ask yourself those questions, really. I think that's where the work is, Ken.
Yeah, in that personal development. Great topic. Thanks for bringing it, Rory. There it is. Theory in Practice, our brand new section. Lots more to come. So keep on tuning in to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. And we now go into the second of our new sections. And this is Practice Partner, where we recognize that being a practitioner sometimes requires that we go into running a business in some way, shape or form, whether that is part-time or whether that is a full-time income. And this is maybe not something that's taught when we do our core training. And I look back to my core training, and luckily I had you as my tutor, Rory, and there was actually a session that we did on starting a private practice. But it's kind of very shallow, not what you taught, Rory, but in terms of core training, because the time is spent quite rightly on becoming a professional practitioner. So Practice Partner, we're going to focus on that during this season. And today, Rory, you've chosen to bring business mindset. I think this is the crux. I think without this being in place, the rest is very difficult to get right.
Yeah. And I think we'd like to start, Ken, with looking at what the term business is.
Yeah.
Business is not a huge car, a large cigar, a pinstripe suit, and sitting behind a huge oak table in a leather chair. Business is providing a quality service to the people that you serve.
Yeah.
It's about making sure that you can pay your bills, and it's about making sure that in these times you can buy food, pay your bills, and look after you and your family. That is business. And I think, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I think some therapists think of business in the latter rather than the former. They think of it more as the cigar and the pinstripe suit and the Rolls Royce, rather than offering a service of which someone will pay you. And I think that it is absolutely principled to offer a paid service.
Yeah.
Mental health provision in this country, as we know, certainly talking about the UK, is, I would say, patchy. And people are happy to pay, private dentistry, private chiropody. These are all people who offer a private service. And I don't think counselling should be any different. And I acknowledge that might be a hard transition for someone who thinks that it should be free. The hard fact of the world is it's not. The provision isn't as widespread as it should be, and people will pay. So I think understanding the principles of business, that you're there to serve your customer, you're there to pay any bills that your business generates, and that you then take from that money to feed your family, is a pretty good start, Ken. What do you think?
Yeah, it's this topic of kind of valuing your skills and putting a pound or a dollar, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to go through all the world's currencies now. a value, a monetary value on your skills. It can be tricky because most of the time going into counselling, we're kind of drawn into it because we want to make a difference. We want to help. We want to serve. We want to be there for others. We don't go into it to accumulate riches and buy the pinstripe suit, as you were just talking about, Rory, and the cigars.
Yeah.
And I think that mindset of wrestling with that, can I charge for this? If I'm charging for this, what about the person who can't afford it? And am I exploiting people in some way? And the truth of the matter is that if you're practicing as a counsellor, even if you are practicing in a charity and the sessions are being delivered free at point of contact, money is changing hands. It just is. Likely that charity will be funded because you need to open your cupboards at home and see tins of beans and sugar and flour, and we need to feed ourselves and look after our family, as you quite rightly said, Rory. And I think that it's the realization that taking money is not exploiting. There are different people who choose different routes, and there are people that, of course, struggle financially, and there are services and funded services in place. But on the other side, there are those that choose to pay, and they do choose to pay. And a GP surgery where I did my placement, quite often the client would be suggested that counselling was offered within the practice, but it was quite a long waiting list. And people would say, "Can I pay?" People can choose to pay, so there is no exploitation there. And I think if you're going to be running a business, if you're going to be running a private practice, you're going to be charging money for that. We need to wrestle with that, get over that first. And you're 100% right, Rory, when you're kind of defining what a business is. When we look to Wall Street, when we look to the capitalist system, there's a very ugly side to business. There just is. Yes. There is an incredible exploitation of the workers, of the it's all about profit margins, but it doesn't have to be that. That is not the definition of business. Business means you're kind of exchanging a service for money, and I think there's a great starting point to wrestle with that, to value yourself and go, you know what, I can charge for this. You work hard. You work hard to get your training. And when you go to get your training, they don't go, well, you're going to be doing good at the end of this training, so you don't have to pay for your training. They go, that will be so many thousands of pounds, please, for your training. You're paying for it. And I think that is a great starting mindset, Rory.
Absolutely, Ken. And have a think about all the people you deal with on a daily basis. It may be a local cafe owner, or I don't know, the person who runs the antique shop that you go in, or the charity shop you go in. They're all running a business, and there's near me there's a young woman who's opened a hatch in a wall, which I think is brilliant. It's called the Hatch.
Love it.
And sells coffee and biscuits. And she was unemployed, and she's got herself a nice little business, exchanging money for coffee, cakes, homemade bread. The quality is a lot better than you would get at maybe a chain, which is why she has a lot of customers, and she really looks after her customers. And I think that's the crux of it. As a self-employed person or someone in a business, you can offer the service you want to your customers. And to those who may say, well, private practice, it costs money. And everybody who goes private is reducing the waiting list of the list of people who can't afford it.
I like that.
We don't live in an ideal world. I'd love that we lived in this world where everybody could get everything they wanted. And you could argue that, governments of any persuasion could do more. But the fact of the matter is we are where we are. And, if you feel you can do that and provide for your family, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And I will share to you, I've been in private practice for about 6 years. I spent the last 14 doing pro bono work.
Yeah.
And I have to say, when I started in private practice, it felt really, I said to my supervisor, someone gave me some money. My supervisor said, yes, that's because you offered a service. And it took a little bit of getting used to. But I want to say it's okay. And you can choose, if you decide to offer a lower cost for someone who's struggling, it's your business, you can do that. So you can still be compassionate, but you should, if you've got a skill, you should be paid for it. And if you don't believe that, phone up the local decorator and ask them to paint your house for free. See how far you get.
Yeah. Or any other service, really.
Or any other service,
yeah.
Yes.
And I think, you touched on something there, Rory, about the years of pro bono work that you did, and then that feeling that came over you when it was now time to ask for money or receive money. And I think that's important because there's an area of personal development there. And I guess the question is, what is your relationship with money? If you look back in your life, how is that relationship? And sometimes when we're considering that business mindset, we need to confront our relationship with money. You may have sayings that go, "Oh, I'm not very good with money." Well, what does that mean? Where did that come from? Who gave you that? Is that real, or is that an irrational belief that you're holding on to there? And you can take this to your supervisor. There's no reason why you can't take the feelings that you have around your private practice relationship with the business mindset to your supervisor. I certainly did with mine. And I was, of course, paying my supervisor when I was going there. So there was a business transaction taking place.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like yourself, Rory, when I was paying for those services, when I was paying for my personal therapy during my training, and I was struggling, I was holding down multiple jobs and balancing the life. As we all know, it's tricky times then. When I was paying, and I was paying a slightly reduced rate with my counselor, which I'm really grateful for, I never at any stage thought, "Oh, I'm being taken for a ride here. This is exploitation." And when I was paying my supervisor, I wasn't thinking that. But when I was taking my first money, I had feelings of, "Oh, So the feelings only existed within me. And, you touched on something a little earlier, Rory, and that if you are charging for what you do in a business, now, obviously, you would need to be set up as a business to be doing this. There is a potential that you might be able to help more people. We're told that when it comes to self-care, that we need to look after ourselves first in order to be there for our clients. And the same is true in business. And I look back to the roots of Counselling Tutor. Rory and I started Counselling Tutor because we wanted to help. And everything we put out was free for well over 2 years.
It was, yeah.
And during that time, we helped, I'm going to say, hundreds of people in that time. And we were able to serve those people, and we're glad we did that. And, when we went over to paid services, I mean, we still have many, many free services. Counsellingtutor.com is free. This podcast is free. Our YouTube channel with millions of views is free. It's all free services. We put out so much for free. We've got... when we went over to charging for some of our products, we thought really hard about it, and we made sure that what we were charging was really, kind and fair and not profit driven, because the key motivator was always to still make that difference. And in selling those products over the years since we started that, Counselling Tutor has grown. As a result of that, it employs people who work within us, many of them counselors who write for us or do other work within Counselling Tutor. And we've gone from helping, supporting and serving hundreds of people to tens of thousands of people a year, and it's not about profit. Our values remain the same. If you're looking for our values, go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the About Us right at the top there, and you'll see our values. We put them on our website, and we will stick to those values, and we weigh every decision we make against those values. We are people over profit every single time, without compromise ever, because that's why we came into this in the first place. And if your mindset is pure, if you know why you are doing what you are doing, if you are in service, hey, it's all right to charge for it.
Absolutely, Ken. And there may be someone listening, a listener listening, thinking, I haven't got a business mindset. But I would ask you this question. You get your money, you get paid, you pay your bills, you pay your council tax, you pay electricity, gas, water. That is effectively running your home business. If you're organized to do that, either by, I do it like a lot of people, I standing order. It's done for me through the bank. But if you're doing that, then you actually have, the very fact you've set it up is the fact that you have a skill set that links into building the business. The next step is to think about how you promote yourself, how much you charge, the kind of mechanisms that you need to be a private practitioner, such as, insurance and somewhere to practice from, or training if you're going to work online, you're going to offer yourself as online. But you're already most of the way there. It's amazing. People say, I've not got a business mind. And I say, well, you're actually paying your bills, and you're keeping afloat. So you're not as kind of you don't have the lack of agency that you think you have. You're already there, really. You just need to kind of step it up a bit. And I know lots of people who run really ethical counselling practices.
Yeah.
And one of the things that surprised me when I went into private practice, Ken, with the greatest respect to those people who may be listening, who may be my clients, was that the people who came to me were ordinary people. They didn't turn up in Ferraris or Porsches or helicopters. We didn't have a landing pad at my practice, I have to say. They turned up, and they were ordinary people wanting help, or extraordinary people wanting help. And they were happy to pay for that help, and they got the help they needed. A lot said, this was really helpful. I can make the changes in my life. I know where I need to go. So there is a I don't know, there's a principled position, I think, for offering paid counselling and being a private practitioner, Ken.
Yeah, well, this is what this new section is about, Practice Partner. We're going to be talking about many different elements of starting and running a private practice. And the truth of the matter is, it is simpler than many think. We can overcomplicate it, specifically going on Google, starting to look around about how to start a business. You're going to be bombarded. You're going to be overwhelmed. It's simpler than you think. As you've already touched on, Rory, it's the same as running a home. You basically got bills that you need to pay and money coming in. But we'll touch on more elements of that. We hope that it is a useful topic. If you are considering starting a private practice, follow along. If you're running one, follow along and feedback on the Facebook group. Go to counsellingtutor.com. No, don't go there. Well, go there anyway, but that's not where you're going to find us on Facebook, is it? Rory, go to Facebook.
No, if you want to go onto Facebook, type in Facebook, Ken.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Go to Facebook. Yeah.
Type in Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, and you'll find us. We're a closed group, but our moderators will let you in, and you can join thousands of like-minded people. We've got supervisors, we've got qualified colleagues, we've got students. We have, I'm sure we have members of the general public in, and start the conversation. And a lot of the conversations will be about starting a private practice or talking about theory or any aspects of counselling. And you come and join us and join the conversation. We'd love to see you there.
Yeah, and if you're starting private practice, share your challenges. It'll give us ideas for topics that we can pull out. I know there's many topics we've already pulled out. People asking should I set up as a limited company? Should I do it as a sole trader? All this and more to come in the Practice Partner section of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Right, we've got to get to Practice Matters, Rory. Why? Because practice matters. It does matter. Practice Matters is the section where we look at something that is related to our practice. It may be a presentation of somebody coming in. It could be something to do with the running of the practice, not the business side, but maybe note-taking or GDPR compliance. But today, it is an interview, Rory, and we love bringing on experts in the field. You spoke with Christine Shaw about humour in therapy.
Yes. A lot of people think that therapy is maybe doom and gloom. And indeed, we do work with some difficulty, sadness, pain in therapy. But there are times where there's levity and that people will share humorous experiences or metaphorically humorous experiences. So I was delighted to interview Christine Shaw, who's done a fantastic lecture on humour in therapy for both our Counsellor CSR library and the CPD library. And she talks about humour in therapy and what she hopes people will take away from her lecture. And this is what she had to say.
The National Counselling Society is proud to sponsor Practice Matters. National Counselling Society are really excited to have launched their Children and Young People Therapist Register for counsellors working with the younger age group. To find out more, visit nationalcounselingsociety.org. nationalcounselingsociety.org.
And we welcome Christine Shaw, who is a colleague of mine. We both teach or have taught together on the supervision course that Counselling Tutor runs. And you're here today to talk about your lecture that you've made for the CSR Library and the Counsellor CPD Library, an upcoming lecture, Humour in Therapy. So my first question is, Christine, is therapy a laughing matter?
I think therapy is a fairly serious matter, isn't it? But I think therapy is also about life and all it entails. And definitely humour is part of that. And occasionally laughter is part of humour. That's the kind of connection in a way. But, sometimes clients will say, I really enjoyed that session. And then they say, is it okay to say enjoyed?
Yes.
So I think there are lots of emotions involved in therapy. And on occasion, we can take ourselves too seriously.
I think that's an interesting point, because I was going to come to this. I think sometimes, we sometimes think of our work in a through a very somber prism. But actually, we're meeting the clients where they're at, aren't we?
Yeah. And let's say, we have clients, of course we do, in those really deep, dark places, and we're there with them there. And we have clients who reach a different place, and that's our aim, to go with them along that journey. And when they get to a place where, some joy starts to appear and some life starts to appear, and it's the actualizing tendency, we'd say in person-centered work, we're there with them as well to celebrate, those aspects of themselves. Yeah.
Absolutely, Christine. And I think some people forget that there is joy in therapy, because, people may have had a change of heart, a change of mind. They may realise that, they aren't to blame for things, and the relief is palpable. And I guess with joy comes humour. Yeah.
And we've all, had, I hope, had those, those clients who come along and you open the door, or you sort of start to talk to them on the telephone, or they appear on your Zoom, and you can see that something is lifted. And that's when some of that kind of, that joy that you called it of life, or that sort of that glad to be alive starts to appear. You can almost visibly see it and hear it in front of you. And why would we be serious about that? Serious in the sense, the way we talk, the way we communicate. There are all sorts of different ways of, forming bonds and being with our clients.
Absolutely. I think you make a really good point, especially around the actualizing tendency. As I say, with joy comes humour, and it's very, very. I've seen it in my therapy room a lot, where people have been so happy, and you share that happiness with the client. Do you think there's a space for laughing at ourselves in therapy?
Absolutely. I think we can tend to begin to think, can't we, that we're very important. And I think we're all of great value, and we're of great value together. But, a therapist can begin to think that there's some kind of vital cog in the workings of things, and we need to get a perspective on ourselves. And I think, it is two people meeting together is where the therapy is where change takes place. It could well be another therapist doing that. And then we worry, about maybe something we said, or should I have said that? And, is the client really worrying about that? I think we can begin to take ourselves very, very seriously and forget the basics, that we're sitting with another human being, and as helpfully as we can.
Yes. I mean, I think what you're speaking to is congruence, being real and genuine in the therapy room. And I know there's been times, I mentioned this in the podcast before, I can remember doing a summary with a young client many, many years ago as a school counsellor. And as I was going through it, I'm thinking to myself, this is awful. This is the worst summary I've ever done. And I got to the end of it and I said, I just think that was probably not a great summary. And she kind of laughed at me. She said, no, it was really bad.
Terrible.
It was terrible. Yes. Well, thank you. Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible. Yes. And I just had one of those off days that I guess therapists have. And when she came in again, she said, have you improved your summaries, Rory? And we had such a good laugh about that.
Yeah.
And I think it improved the therapeutic relationship. She saw me as a human being.
And it's something that you and that client share. No one else is knowing about your terrible summaries necessarily, but you and her have that kind of bond now. It's a kind of something you refer back to. You can, some of these kind of things can almost become a theme, throughout, and it creates memories in a way. It sort of creates a kind of, oh, can you remember when moments, in a small way, but it starts to bond you with that person, and it shows your client, doesn't it, that you're a real person too. You're not this expert who's, sort of seriously telling them, this is what I find. You're kind of saying, I'm here with you too, and I think any moments like that, you kind of remember.
I think you're right. I think you're right. If I think of therapy I've had, the moments I tend to remember are those ones of connection, and humour plays surprisingly enough, humour plays a big part in my life. I can always see the funny side of things, which then brings me to the point of how do we become self-aware around humour? I don't think any client wants a stand-up comedian as a therapist.
And, I can't tell a joke. I just can't do it. I forget them. I can't do it. And so I think there are so many different types of humour, aren't there? And if it's not part of who you are, okay, it's not part of who you are, and that's all right. But if it is a big part of how you communicate, and I think it would be silly to stifle it. If you have, just the right thing to say at just the right time, it's like any other intervention, isn't it, in counselling? Why would you keep it in? Why wouldn't you use it? But I think it's being very aware, though, of why you're using it. That, you're not just trying to look clever or kind of get something in. It arises naturally. And it arises from what the client is giving you. Yeah.
So I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's external, isn't it? So we're reacting as therapists. We react and we work with what the client brings. And if there's a theme of somberness, then we may work with that. But if there's a theme of joy, and it really just comes back, doesn't it, to being who you are. As a supervisor, do you encourage your supervisees to kind of explore the humorous side of them, if appropriate?
I think, I wait until really a supervisee may bring humour and, maybe be telling me something that happened in a session and something they said. And sometimes they don't realise it is humour. They've picked up on a theme, really. I remember a supervisor telling me how their client had a lot of anxiety and had real problems, ordering a sandwich in one of those places where they go through, do you want this on, do you want that on, do you want the other on? And they just sort of said, I want a ham sandwich, and they remembered that. They kind of brought it into the session later, and they kind of... And I could see the humour there, and I had to tell them, that's a really good use of therapeutic humour, and they didn't know. And other times people will, supervisees will say, oh, I said this thing, and, and we laughed. And I'm not sure if that's okay.
Oh.
And that's when we start to look at it, was it okay or wasn't it okay? And it's, I think the clue is in the word we. We laugh.
Yes.
we're sharing it. We're doing something together here. We're in the same place at the same time. And clients, can, I've heard supervisors, telling me about clients who are hysterical with laughter at some things when a perspective suddenly changes and it gets rid of a load of weight.
Yes. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that picking up on that, should I have laughed at that? Should I have done that? I think certainly for trainee colleagues, there's a sense that sometimes that gets projected in training that we're in a serious profession. It's a professional profession, that we're, working with the client. And sometimes that side of us, that humorous side of us gets lost. But what I'm hearing you saying, as long as the humour is part of a co-created relationship, then you're almost always going to be on the right side of it. It's part of developing the relationship.
It's to be treated with care, and I say a lot of how, I think, in my lecture. And, I as a student, I kind of, came across laughter and humour in my sessions and the recordings we had to do. And I remember feeling a bit kind of, is this okay or not? And I was met with a bit of a, it didn't look as though it was quite okay. But I stuck with it.
Yeah.
I don't go into a session, as I say, like thinking it's going to be funny or anything, but if it arises, I work with it. I work with what's given. And I would encourage, supervisors to work with what comes helpfully, appropriately.
Well, I think that on that note, we'll come to the end of our interview, because I think it's absolutely about working appropriately, like in every aspect of our practices. It's being, appropriate, and I think probably measured. One final question. What do you hope that people will get from your lecture? What do you hope that those who watch it may take away?
Yeah, I hope people will, no longer be, thinking that humour has to be something in hiding or something not to be talked about, that they'll see the relevance and appropriateness and helpfulness of the good use of humour in therapy, and have the confidence, I think, to be congruent in use all parts of themselves, not to be a diluted version of yourself, to bring those parts out in service of the client.
Well, thank you, Christine. Christine Shaw's lecture, Humour in Counselling, is going to be available in the Counsellor, CSR and CPD libraries. It isn't one to be missed, an essential component, I think, of any therapeutic awareness. And Christine Shaw, thank you so much for joining us today.
Big thank you to Christine Shaw. Big thank you to you, Rory, for hosting that interview. If you want to listen to Christine's lecture on humour in therapy, if you're a qualified practitioner, we have a library. It's a CPD library, a continuing professional development library. You can find more about that at counsellingtutor.com. If you're a student and you want to dip your toe into humour in therapy, Christine agreed to share the lecture in our counselling study resource. That's a resource library for students, and you can find more about that by also going to counsellingtutor.com. And Rory, this has been episode 234 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yeah, it's really delightful to be back after the academic break with a brand new format. We started with theory and practice, where we spoke about how the core conditions can be used in real life situations with real life people. We moved on to practice partner, again, another new section in our podcast where we talk about business mindset and exploring what you need to think about if you're going to set yourself up as a self-employed counsellor. And finally, practice matters. We interview Christine Shaw, who talks about humour in therapy. It's been a full bundle of information, and as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.